Hello, so today we're going to be talking about the 3 stages of childbirth, some signs of labor, what false labor versus real labor is, and the 3 stages of childbirth specifically. I'm also going to give you a little demo on what it looks like for the cervix to be fully effaced and what that really means, and show you where contractions happen on the uterus. So, some early signs of labor, one could be pink discharge. So that would be your mucus plug that's in your cervix being released. So what that plug does during pregnancy is it helps keep the baby healthy, keeps bacteria out, and keeps the baby in. So when it's time for delivery and labor, that plug is going to come out, and that's the pink discharge that you would be seeing if you're at that point of labor. Another thing that can happen is your water can break. So I'm sure you guys have heard of that, and that means that the amniotic sac that the baby is in breaks. Time for the baby to come out, it's ready to go, so that amniotic sac breaks, and then the fluid that was in there that the baby was being housed in whooshes out of the vaginal opening. Not everyone's water will actually break on its own. Sometimes the nurse or doctor has to do it. So that's not something that happens in every labor, but a lot of the time that's one of the first signs of when a woman says, oh gosh, I need to go to the hospital because my water broke. Another thing that will show you that you're in labor is contractions. Those contractions should be close together and pretty intense if it's real labor, and we'll talk about that a little bit later too. So if you go to the hospital and you have all of those things happen, you said my water broke, I'm feeling contractions, my mucus plug came out, I had some discharge, you're not going to be admitted necessarily. So to be admitted, they're going to check what your cervix looks like and how dilated it is. So it's not time to push until these 3 things happen. 1, the baby has to be in 0 station, is what they call it. It's when the baby's head is down, it's ready to come out of the birth canal, and it's dropped. The second thing that has to happen is your cervix has to fully efface. So I'll show you what that means. But your cervix is there, and then when it's effaced, that means it disappears pretty much. So it's gone and ready to release the baby. Also, the cervix needs to be dilated to 10 centimeters. So the nurse or the doctor will digitally feel how dilated you are. Usually they'll estimate, but they do have tools to measure also. But 10 centimeters is about the size of the width of the hand. Some people also say like a bagel. It's like the size of a bagel. So that's how much it has to be dilated. If you're not dilated that much, if let's say you're dilated 10 centimeters and you go to the doctor or the hospital and you say that your water broke, they're usually going to send you home because you're not ready to push and you're not ready for labor. Another thing that they sometimes will do is give you a drug called Pitocin to induce your labor, and that'll speed up your contractions, make them closer together. That's what induction is. So, is it false labor or real labor? How do you know the difference? Contractions will tell you a lot about if you're in real labor or false labor. One thing is the frequency of the contractions, so that's how often they happen and how long they happen. So how close together are your contractions? Are they pretty like the same? Like you could have a contraction and then not have one for an hour and then have one 5 minutes after the next one. So they need to be pretty routine. Is that the word I'm looking for? Pretty consistent. So happening consistently. And another thing is the intensity of the contractions will show if you're in real labor or false labor. So if those contractions are super intense and very painful and you're not able to speak or anything else like that, then that's pretty intense contractions. You're probably gonna need to go to the hospital. If it's not too intense and it's just like a tightening deep inside, you're probably not in real labor yet. Another thing is if the contractions can be stopped by changing your position, walking around, bouncing on a ball, then you're probably not in real labor. because when you're in real labor, the contractions are not going to stop regardless of what position you're in. There's 3 stages of birth. The first stage of birth is everything that happens before the baby is born. So you're gonna start having contractions that it causes the cervix to dilate. Your water's gonna break maybe, your mucus plug is gonna come out. You're gonna have signs of early labor. So that's the first stage, is your uterus starting to work to cause your cervix to dilate. The second stage of birth is when the baby is born. So the baby comes out of the uterus, goes through the cervix, out of the vagina, and the baby's here. Actually, a lot of the times women say that the hardest part of birth is getting the head out. Actually, sometimes when the head comes out, the nurse and the doctor tell the woman to slow down and stop pushing because her perineum can actually rip. That's the skin between the vaginal opening and the anus. So usually they'll say, oh, slow, like don't keep going, slow down. And sometimes they'll actually make an incision between the vaginal opening and the anus, and they'll do that if they think that the woman might tear there. So if she tears, it's going to be a bunch of shredded tissue, and it's not going to be easy to suture up and not going to be easy for that woman to heal. But if they make the incision, then it's going to be a nice clean cut, easier to sew up. So they'll sometimes have to do that. The third stage of birth is the placenta coming out. So after the baby's born, there's still a ton of tissue and placenta and fluid that's still in the uterus. The third stage of birth is expelling that placenta and everything else. So there's a lot of liquid and a lot of tissue that has to come out before that uterus starts shrinking down. Actually, when the uterus starts shrinking down, it's like more contractions to get down to the size that it was supposed to be at before. So you're still gonna feel contractions after you give birth. That's just the uterus doing its job and getting back down to the size. So I'm gonna show you guys what it looks like to have your cervix dilated and to have your cervix effaced. So this balloon is going to represent a uterus, and the ping pong ball is going to represent a baby's head. So let me blow this up. Okay. So we talked about Braxton Hicks contractions a little bit. I'm going to show you guys what those are. So Braxton Hicks contractions happen around the uterus, and they're just little ones. You can see here, this is going to represent the cervix here, and this is the opening. But you can see the cervix is staying the same. The baby's head isn't dropping anymore. It's kind of just here. The uterus is working, conditioning itself. When the real contractions start, actually sometimes this is when women go to the hospital, they request to be admitted, but they're actually not in real true labor yet. They're just in early labor. So that's here. When the real contractions begin to happen, it's chopped down over the entire uterus, and you can see the baby starts dropping and the cervix is beginning to efface. So usually what would be happening is these contractions would happen for a few minutes, then they would stop completely. The woman could talk, she's a little more calm, and then another contraction hits, and they actually have a belt around their belly that's measuring the contractions, and you can see it on a little screen that's next to her. So a lot of the times you'll see like the husbands or the dads being like, oh my gosh, a big one's here, and then the wife is on the table like, I know. I've seen that happen. So another contraction is coming, and you can see now the cervix is completely gone, so they call that effaced, 100% effaced. And then here it's beginning to dilate more as the baby drops. Now, the woman, also the woman only pushes when she's having a contraction. So when she's not having a contraction, she's just calm, waiting for the next one, trying to get her breathing down. And then another contraction comes and the doctor will say, okay, time to push again. And this is when you would push. Oh, you're fully dilated. We're going. This is happening. And those are the 3 stages of birth. After that, the placenta would come. Yeah, thanks.